Are religion's claims too absurd for you? If so, don't look to physics. A lot of what I talk about is that spirituality isn't about giving up intelligence or sex or beer for that matter, or enjoyment in general, or who you are. In fact, spirituality is more aligned with intelligence when intelligence is really used and doesn't respect barriers and boundaries and conventional ideas and received wisdom no matter where it comes from, whether it's a preacher or a scientist. And I think this haiku is particularly in line with that because there's this idea that common sense tells us there's nothing beyond this world. When we die, that's it. How could it be otherwise? Come on. And there's an idea that science reinforces a common sense view of the world. So therefore, science, if we believe science and we want to be smart, is to believe in a common sense view of the world, and a common sense view of the world says there's nothing beyond the world. This is actually a complete illusion. Absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. So back around the 1880s, the German philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche said, God is dead. And in the 1880s, that made a lot of sense. And science was a big part of that. So we had the scientific revolution. We had Isaac Newton with his laws of physics. We had Darwin with his theory of evolution. We had all kinds of inventions in the 1800s. You had steam power, factories, trains, photography, the telegraph, germ theory, and Darwin's theory of evolution. So it was a huge mechanized eruption. Technology was really king. And it was a very mechanical, largely, technology. So it would make sense that we're starting to feel like, yeah, God's a little beside the point. We're kind of doing pretty good here with our technology. God is starting to sound pretty absurd. He's dead. And so there was this idea that science backed up this mechanical, mindless, impersonal model of ultimate reality because of all these mechanical inventions in our immediate reality. And so there was this idea that we can pretty much explain how the universe works. Mechanical rules, common sense. This is just not true anymore. And the big shift happened right around 1900, so just 20 or so years after Nietzsche. And the big figure that started this was Einstein. Some of you may know what Einstein's theories basically say. So he has a couple, special relativity and general relativity, and he said E equals mc squared. What is all that stuff? Well, basically, time and space are not two different things. They're one thing called space-time. Gravity warps space-time, so time slows down near any object because every object has a little gravity, but noticeably slows down around large objects like the Earth or the Sun. Time also changes depending on how fast you go. If you're approaching the speed of light, it would start to get noticeable for humans. And this has all been verified. And that's completely alien to our everyday common sense view of the world. E equals mc squared. That actually says, in plain old English, that energy is the same thing as mass. Okay, so movement is the same as the thing that's moving. Sort of a colloquial way to put that. Energy is mass? That's insane. That's nothing to do with our everyday life or common sense. But we actually have been using those laws in various ways ever since Einstein. The other huge revolution that started right around that time and that Einstein actually played a role in is called quantum physics. You may have heard something about that. Quantum physics is, if anything, weirder than Einstein. Quantum physics is the study of very small things. So you're zeroing closer and closer and closer and closer into the objects around us. And what was discovered is that objects or things are fundamentally not things. They are somehow embodied or spread out, no one's quite sure how this works, in a wave, what's called a probability wave. So a tiny thing called an electron is spread out in a wave somehow, and it appears as an electron or a particle at some point in that wave. And don't worry if this doesn't make sense, because no one really can picture this, and that's my point. But it's absolutely established physics, and it has been established physics for about 100 years. Not only this, every particle and force is spread out in a wave, which means you are, or your body, and all those waves interact in one universal wave function that's spread across the entire universe. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Just to name one other unbelievably absurd and completely accepted idea in physics is that the entire universe was compressed to something smaller than a grain of sand before it exploded out into the known universe in an event we call the Big Bang. My point is this, that the modern, scientific, firmly established picture of ultimate reality is eons more absurd and different from everyday common sense reality than any religion or myth or fantasy novel or anything dreamed up in any other area of human endeavor. Right? So this thing we think of as brass tacks, no nonsense, just the evidence, discipline, physics, is delivering us a picture that is way more absurd than anything else that we've dreamed up in our fantasies. So, instead of now saying God is dead, it makes more sense to say common sense is dead. At least as a way to think about ultimate reality. If you don't like religion because you think that's just too absurd to picture, and you want to go to science for another approach to ultimate reality, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get a common sense view. There's nowhere really to go to find a common sense view of reality reinforced. Now, I'm not saying that modern physics proves God exists, or that modern physicists would say there's a God or a spiritual realm, because probably most would say there isn't. They will say, well, mathematical laws govern this strange world, even if we can't really understand it. We do have some mathematical formulas. And that's true. Now, what that says is a more complex topic, and I go into this in my book called The Science Spell, if you'd like to dive into that more. My point here is that if you feel that you are backed up by science in saying that I don't believe in anything beyond what we experience every day, that's just an illusion for ignorant or unintelligent people, you are in an illusion because science doesn't back that viewpoint up. Science, specifically quantum physics and relativity, and more specifically quantum physics, absolutely demolishes the idea that what we experience is in any way reflective of the ultimate reality that's there. If you want to believe science, that's what you need to believe. Believe anything else you want about the existence or non-existence of God or angels or anything like that, but there is no longer a leg to stand on for the viewpoint that our everyday experience reflects ultimate reality in any way.